And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Linda Rising has a PhD from Arizona State University in the field of object-based design metrics. She's taught at the university level and has worked in telecommunications, avionics, and strategic weapon systems. Linda is an internationally known presenter on topics related to patterns, retrospectives, agile development approaches, and change process, and she's written 5 books. She was honored by the World Agility Forum in 2020 with their Lifetime Achievement Award. Please give a huge pink stage welcome to Linda Rising, The Science of Teaming.
Okay, thank you so much. I want to make sure that you can see me and that you can hear me. Is all good? Everything good?
All good.
Yay. All right. Thank you. So this first slide has my contact information. I hope that you will have some questions for me. And if you don't think of any today, I hope you will contact me maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day. Your System 1 and System 2 will both be working hard on this topic, and you'll think of things. So please send me some email. And let's connect on LinkedIn. So here's a test. Can I move to the second page? Yes. Okay. Wonderful. Great. So is it okay? I feel like I hear all good?
All good.
Okay. All right. We haven't been around as a species for very long, but what we do know about our history is that we spent most of it in small groups. You could call them teams. We have been doing teams for tens of thousands of years. And we're very good at it. We like it. We are at our best when we work in a small team. And we struggle when teams get too large. There are plenty of examples in our long history of that. The earliest record of large teams comes from the military. Military organizations have been around for thousands of years, and we know from that history what works and what doesn't. After the military, the next most influential organization on our thinking about teams comes from the church. The early church also began to see sizes of groups, what works well, what doesn't work, and began to introduce the notion of hierarchy. Who's in charge? Who's the leader? Who makes the important decisions? All of this is experience-based. And I'm sure that at this conference, you have heard from experienced, very smart people and sponsors, and that is valuable. But for me, especially as I get older, I want to see evidence. Now, science doesn't give you absolute answers, but what science shows us is the result of real evidence-based experiments. We have a history for the last couple of hundred years of looking at issues from a science-based perspective. And that's what I'm interested in, the science of teams. Luckily, my interest coincided with the research of a very important psychologist at Oxford University. His name is Robin Dunbar. He's written several books, and his interest is in the sizes of teams. and the levels in an organizational hierarchy. So we're talking about a scientist, someone who does experiments, someone who studies what works and what doesn't. He's also looked at group sizes in other animals and has learned from studying other groups of animals what can be applied to the human animal and what can we learn from the way other animals have been structuring their groups for tens of thousands of years. So the most popular result from Robin Dunbar's research is something you may have heard of. Some people think that it's a magic result, a magic number. In fact, it's often called Dunbar's number. And that number is 150. Now, there's no magic, of course. This has to do with scientific evidence of limitations on how people work together. And Dunbar's number has been, I would say, widely misunderstood. For one thing, it is not a single number. There is no magic 150. It's a range of numbers. Of course, nothing happens overnight as soon as a team grows to be 150. And more than that, it's a series, a collection of different numbers that can be used in organizations to structure different sizes of entities based on science. So this magic number, this 150, can be seen in our long history. I mentioned earlier that we have been in teams, we have been doing teams for tens of thousands of years, and we can find evidence of that going back to early documents. We can also find evidence in archaeology, evidence that there is something around 150 that means things work well. As long as we observe that and don't grow too large, we are, as a group, more successful. We can see that in Neolithic villages. We can also see it in, remember, the first large organizations were military. We have documented evidence from the Roman times that they saw the same numbers that Dunbar has discovered, including this magic 150. Now, they may have different names for it. They may call this group of 150. They may not say team. And of course, it would be in a different language. But across time, across cultures, we'll see this number, 150, over and over and over. I read an interesting book just recently called The Year 1000. And it said that in the United Kingdom, at the time of the year 1000, all the villages that are around today were still there. They were there 1,000 years ago. And they also evidence this magic number right around 150. There are also cultural evidences of 150. You may or may not have heard of several of the religious groups that I will mention. One is called the Hutterites. They have structured their communities. They live together on farms. They have structured their communities around the number 150, not because they knew Dunbar's research, but because they saw, based on their experience, they saw that when things got a lot bigger than 150, they struggled to have a measure of success. So they have intuitively stumbled across the magic number 150, and when their communities begin to grow, they divide, they split. It's sort of like cellular division, meiosis and mitosis. They split the communities and start over again. So we see lots of experience, and it all validates the research by Robin Dunbar. Now, you might be thinking, since most of you are, I know, much younger than I am, and much younger than Robin Dunbar, you may think, all my life, I have been online. My circle of friends is enormous. I have many more than 150 friends. I have many more than 150 elements in whatever your module might be for your social life. So Robin Dunbar's work now is examining whether or not the magic numbers hold up for those who communicate virtually. Well, just like we are now. Perhaps the internet has changed everything. So began a series of experiments by Robin Dunbar and others. And what they found was not really. Those people online who might believe they have 700 Facebook friends, really, when it comes right down to it, the only limit on how many friends you have is your time and your brain. And that has not changed for tens of thousands of years. And the internet has essentially no impact. Yes, you might have a lot of connections. I look at how many connections I have. I don't even know most of my connections. I certainly couldn't consider them friends. I don't know what they're going through in their daily lives. I don't share everything I'm going through in my life, which is right now having my house painted so everything is upside down. I only share that information with a few friends. So what the research on social media has shown is that 150, that limit, is a human limit. And it will hold whether we are gathering face to face or whether we are connecting online. Not just Robin Dunbar, but others who are looking at this same issue have found that it's very difficult to overcome a human limit on the number of connections, real connections, that we can make. Robin Dunbar's new book, and I know you are too busy. Many of you probably don't even read books anymore. You listen to books, I'm not sure. But his new book is called Friends. And it is an examination of his research within the context of the internet, looking at how we make connections now online, virtual teams. Does the research hold up? And what can we learn? It's a wonderful book. I recommend it. Well, let's look at these numbers. They're not just a single number. It's a series of numbers. It's a series of levels of numbers. And each number is included in the following number. So for instance, the smallest number is what Dunbar calls intimates. These are your best friends, your closest friends. They could be members of your family. They could be a spouse or a brother or sister, someone you are especially close to, someone with whom you share the details, the struggles, the challenges of your life. So for humans, that limit is about 1.5. Now, of course, we can't have half a person. So this is a statistical mean or average. On average, 1.5 people we're very close to. And then we have close friends. And that for Dunbar is about 5. Now that includes the 1.5 intimates. And then we'll have 15 that we might call best friends. And that includes the 5 close friends, the 1.5 intimates. And then we'll have 50 good friends, and then finally 150 friends. Now, beyond 150, there are also other names, other limits. 500 acquaintances, 1,500 known names. I know about 1,500 people. I recognize about 5,000 faces. So remember, these numbers have to do with human limits and have to do with how close the connections are, how comfortable we feel with these people, what kind of information we share, how well we work together. And what's interesting for us is that many companies now use these numbers to structure the sizes of teams, sizes of various parts of the organization working their way up the hierarchy. So I've been asked for decades, how big should a team be? All the while not having a lot of research to back up my recommendation. Now I have Dunbar's evidence to back me up. To say, you know, a team really shouldn't be too big. I'm going to guess it's around 6 or 7. And that comes close to Dunbar's recommendation of close friends. That number, that magic number of people really work well together. They get to know one another, they cooperate, they develop trust. And as it grows, all of those components decrease. Trust goes down, connection goes down, cooperation goes down. And there are little magic numbers along the way that it would be wise for us to think about as we structure teams, departments, even organizations themselves. This is kind of a visual so that you see that at each level, we include all of the levels below. So we can see close friends also includes intimates. Best friends includes close friends, and so on. Well, I have been working in this organization for a long time. In this industry, I have been asked a lot of questions. And as I look back, I don't remember that most organizations really ever asked, how big should a team be? In fact, as I look back on some of the early days, serious big projects I worked on that had to do with telecom, avionics, and yes, I'm sorry, the military, weapons, no one seemed to care. How big should a team be? In fact, and I still see this today, the general feeling is more is better, especially if a team is behind schedule. And I know you have been on a team that has been behind schedule. The first thing that managers' decisions have to do with more people. If we can get more people on this project, then that will help. The feeling was more brains, more hands, more ideas, more innovation, and teams got bigger and bigger and bigger. I can remember in particular one team that started out with 6 people, a good size that fits with one of Dunbar's numbers. 6 is a good size for a team. But the team was already behind schedule. So what did management do? Of course, they kept adding more people. And instead of seeing the schedule get better, they got further and further behind. So what did management do? They kept adding more and more people. That little team of 6 grew to more than 100 in just about a month. Management was so desperate. They knew they had deadlines. And in good intentions, these were not bad people. They thought the answer was throw more people at it. Not only that, the solution usually lies in not just more people, but having them work more hours. One of the biggest innovations that Agile development has brought to the table is we actually do a better job if we don't have to work so many hours. That was astounding as a result for most development teams. And many organizations still struggle with that. Many organizations still believe that if we work longer hours, we will be more productive. We'll produce more. In fact, I'll bet you still feel that. I'll bet you think if you work longer hours, you'll get more accomplished. I can't see you and I won't ask you to raise your hands, but I just bet I still see that. I still run into this obstacle. The 2 very poor management decisions, and by management, I don't just mean someone in an organization who has a title. I mean someone who's in charge of your time. And that could just be you. You think, if I just worked longer hours, things would be better. No one seemed to care. Was there any evidence? What does the science say about working longer hours? Are teams more productive? Are big groups more productive? No one asked the question. No one seemed to be interested. They just felt their gut feeling, their intuition, their system 1 was telling them more people, more hours. That's how we make our deadlines. That's how we become productive and innovative. We needed Robin Dunbar's research. It was just lucky for me that I happened to discover it because nobody was asking that question. So once I saw Robin Dunbar's research, I began to look. I began to look for those magic numbers. And the most common problem that I saw was that even with the evidence in hand, even with the science, people were not convinced. They didn't believe me. And even in the organizations that did believe me, there is a serious problem. Once you have made a bad decision, once you have a team that already has 100 people, it's too late. You can't back up. You can't undo that. I have tried. I have been trying to do this for decades, and it doesn't work. I wish I could find some magic secret, not only just the magic numbers, but how do you back up after you've made a bad decision, and how do you undo that? Because I can't make it work. In fact, once you have a team of 100, the interconnections are impossible to break. No one really knows who's in charge of what. No one really understands what part of the team is working on what part of the project, and how do they communicate exactly. I think most of us have been reading a lot about artificial intelligence and how neural networks learn and how they produce something that makes decisions and takes actions. And what we're finding is no one really understands that. Once the AI program gets going, nobody knows. Now, to me, this is not surprising because that's the way teams have been operating for tens of thousands of years. We don't know how it works. All we know is that now, once you have this team of 100, you can't break it apart. It's too late. And you are stuck with the inefficiency, the lack of productivity, the increasing stress, and I would say depression. Everyone knows this is not a good way to work. Everyone knows we're paying the penalty for having too many people on the team. But now there's no way out. I actually worked with a team that tried to bring in a sociologist and look at what's called a sociogram. What are the connections so that maybe we could structure some little smaller pieces, sub-teams, and we couldn't do it. The sociogram looked like a spider's web, enormous numbers of connections that no one really understood or could resolve. It was a hopeless mess. Once we descended into chaos, we can't get out. Now, that sounds a little discouraging, but it gets worse. There are a lot of small organizations, little startups, and they, in the beginning, think, wow, this is such a great experience. There are 3 or 4 of us, and we have the idea for a product, and we're going to work together, and we're going to have a lot of success, and this is going to be so much fun. And it is. I have worked in some of those. And if you have success, now you start to grow. And not paying any attention to the science, you just keep growing and growing and growing. So I just did an online consultancy with a little startup that is now right around 150 people. And the problem they had is, they say, Linda, we're losing it. Well, those great times we had as a startup, it was so much fun, and then we knew everybody, and we knew what we were doing, and now we don't know what's wrong. Can you help us? And the answer is simple, of course. Once you know the science, look at Dunbar's number. anytime a group grows so large that you're now closing in on that magic number, 150, you can't do it. You're losing it. Whatever it was that you had at the beginning, that excitement is gone. You can't maintain it when the numbers get too big. And once you cross that threshold, it's almost impossible to undo it, to back up. So this is a story about a successful company. It's a company that makes a product called Gore-Tex. Now, in the introduction, you'll remember that I got my PhD from Arizona State. This is a company in Arizona. Everyone knew about it. I do a lot of serious bike riding, and in the rain, if you have something made by Gore-Tex, that is your best hope. It's not going to solve everything. You might still get pretty wet, but as rain gear, this is the best. Now, the company was started by somebody named Gore. No relation to Al Gore. It's a horrible name. It sounds pretty gruesome, but Bill Gore started the company. And in the beginning, it was a startup. And in the beginning, it was great. In the beginning, it was fun. In the beginning, everybody knew everybody. Everybody was connected to everybody. Things worked well. And then one day, the story goes, Bill Gore walked into one of his factories and he realized he didn't know a lot of the people. He somehow intuited, he somehow sensed, his gut feeling was, we've got too many people here. And he arbitrarily chose the number 150. He said, we're going to take this group of people and we're just going to divide them in half. It was okay as a decision, but there was a lot of chaos in the beginning. And if you'll remember, I said, you can't back up. Dividing, wow, that is a hard task. But he was determined to do it. He split the group in half. He moved half of them to another building. They have a different parking lot. They don't communicate with one another except through the very top echelon. And he decided from that moment on, he was never going to allow a part of the company to ever grow beyond 150. And what he saw in his experiment was things got better. The smaller groups were more efficient and they enjoyed it more. They knew everybody. Who was the manager? Who was the accountant? Who made the sandwiches for lunch? 150, he discovered on his own, was a magic number. Now, lest we get too carried away, 150 will not solve all your problems. It's necessary. I was a mathematician for a while. Necessary, but not sufficient. It's not enough, but it is a requirement. So if you look carefully at Gore as a company, this is a company that has purpose, that understands how to treat employees well, that allows people freedom, sense of responsibility. Bill Gore was an amazing individual. It wasn't just 150 that made Gore successful. Bill Gore's not around anymore, but the company spirit, I think I can use that word, the spirit lives on. And that's the important piece. I think in agile development, we get caught up with rules, procedures, And we forget that it's the heart, the purpose. Why are we here? That's what makes us successful. Yes, the 150 was crucial. Yes, it made that company famous because now it is the primary example for Dunbar's number is Gore-Tex. Yes, it is how the company works. They still use and follow that 150 as a guideline still. But that's not enough. It's an important piece. So we don't want to get carried away with the magic and the magic numbers and forget that the most important thing is purpose, heart, spirit. So let's look at these nice numbers. We've already said it's not enough. You need purpose. There's another thing science warns us about. For that, we need the research of another psychologist. His name was Henri Tachfeld, no longer with us. He's a Holocaust survivor. There were many Holocaust survivors who went on to study how people treat other people. So his experience led him to believe that somehow people get trapped. They get trapped inside a group and they believe somehow that that group is better than people who are not in the group. It's an us versus them. So in his research, he tried to find what is it? What is the smallest difference between people that will cause us to have this us versus them feeling that will then, of course, affect our behavior and how we treat other people. So he didn't begin with the big differences. We know that big differences in race, gender, religion, politics, of course, those divide us, and we can see the effects of that today. So he tried to make the differences smaller and smaller and smaller. Where is the line? Where does it start to matter that you are different from me? And now I think of it as us and them. And what his research showed is horrifying. It takes almost nothing. It takes almost nothing to get us to divide into us versus them. It doesn't have to be important. It doesn't have to be a major component of our lives. It can be trivial. It can be almost nonsensical. And yet, it divides us. This classic experiment had participants look at dots on a screen. How many dots are there? And that was the question. So participants guessed. They couldn't count them because there were so many dots. So they made a guess. And at the end of the part of the experiment, Tajfel said, "Oh, your guess was pretty good, but you were an overestimator. You saw more dots than actually are there." It was random, a total random assignment. And to the others, he said, well, you were pretty close, but your number wasn't exactly on. You were a little under. You were an underestimator. Now, this wasn't truth. This wasn't reality. People were just told randomly that they were an overestimator or an underestimator for one screen full of dots. Now, that's pretty minimal, but it was enough. For the next part of the experiments, Tajfel would ask them, how would you treat someone who was also an overestimator or an underestimator? How much money would you give them if you were asked to share? In every follow-on phase, people in the overestimator group favored other overestimators and refused to give money or discriminated against or stereotyped or ignored or didn't like the people who were the underestimators. It doesn't say good things about us. That a random assignment, this is not an important thing. It has nothing to do with our feelings about what we really care about. So we must bear in mind, in creating teams, not only how many people are going to be there, but watch out. Because as soon as a group of people begins to work together and has some sense of team, that now they are going to feel that us against them for everyone who isn't on their team. There's a downside to good teams, a serious, serious downside. Yes, these numbers are important. Thank you, Robin Dunbar. But now the downside is, thank you, Henry Tajfel. There's penalty. Organizations seem to focus on the good things and they forget about the downsides. And I think the worst, in my long experience, the worst is t-shirts. Oh, you may think this is funny or it's a joke, but it is not. Once you give a team their t-shirt, you know, it's not for nothing that the military wears uniforms. When you give a team a t-shirt and you don't give that t-shirt to any other team, the message is pretty clear. We are the ones who wear the special t-shirt. You don't have it. I once led a retrospective in Europe. We spent a day, an entire day, talking about t-shirts. We didn't get t-shirts. They got t-shirts. Now, is there anything wrong with a t-shirt? No, of course not. But just make sure that everyone gets the same t-shirt. Don't ever single out a person, a team, a department by giving them something special to wear. It's a signal to the others on the team, a signal to the others who are not on the team. We have it and you don't. Beware. So let's have some good research. Let's talk about some positive things we can do. And this is one of the most positive things I have uncovered in the last 2 years. It's very interesting research that comes out of Harvard Business. It has to do with rituals, and I think it fits with agile development. A ritual is something that we do that has meaning for us. It's not a habit. There's a difference between a ritual and a habit. A habit is something that has no meaning. You just do it. You put your right shoe on first every morning. That's a habit. It has no meaning. There's no purpose to it. A ritual is something that has special significance. You do it because you think it's important. And because you think it's important, it is important. The research shows that this is real. The belief in the importance of a ritual makes it important. The biggest example of this is the world of athletics or sports. Whatever sport you care about or are interested in, you likely know some sports figure that does something crazy. They eat special food, or they wear special clothes, or they turn their shirts inside out, or they switch their socks and they wear the same pair of socks during the whole season. I don't know. There are a whole host of crazy, some of them are so crazy rituals, but they work. These rituals are important to the individuals who follow the rituals. They measurably improve importance, and they raise self-esteem and confidence. The athlete would no more stop wearing the shirt or the socks or going through the special food. Then they would say that would be the end of it. This is important to me. I care about it. So we know there's a fair amount of research about the agile practices. I'm not going to call them rituals yet. But there's a very famous article that was written in IEEE Computer that took all of the little pieces of agile and said, this is not new. Here's where it originated. And sometimes it was some practice that had been around for decades. So it's not that agile had anything new to offer. What it did was it put it all together and it added something important, which is the idea of ritual. The research is new. If you don't subscribe to Harvard Business Review, send me some email and I will send you these papers. So an individual at Harvard became interested in ritual because he read about rituals performed during the American Civil War, strange things that families did when their sons were killed, when they were terrified that the war was happening around them. And he wondered, do these rituals really have an impact? Do they have serious consequences? He knew that there is evidence that people around the world, all cultures, have rituals. But do they have measurable impact? Do they make a difference? His research was combined with that of Francesca Gino. And by the way, let me throw in a plug here. If you see anything by Francesca Gino, you should pay attention. She does amazing research. She is also at Harvard. Okay, end of commercial. So in their experiments, they found that rituals work. They have measurable impact. And you don't even have to believe in them. We think of rituals as, well, religion. Not necessarily. It can be about anything. So as an example, in one experiment, 2 groups were asked to write using a real pen and paper, write about some things that were bothering them. So they did. One group was asked to tear up the paper, sprinkle it with salt, and count to 10. And they felt measurably better. Whereas the other group, the control group, did not. This was a made up ritual. It didn't have any deep significance. Oh, I've seen this in agile teams all the time. Don't mess with the daily stand up. It's supposed to be daily. If you change it and it's not daily, well, then it won't work anymore. And I said, well, wait a minute. It's just a made up practice. If you don't want to meet every day, meet every other day. It will be fine. Oh, no. Oh, no. We must meet every day. Is that a ritual? Why is it that some teams have successful retrospectives, have successful stand ups, and others don't? Athletes never say, I don't think I'll wear my socks backwards anymore. That's silly. They never do that because they believe that it's key to their success. And he's or she is right. That's the power of ritual. Maybe that's the difference. Teams that believe, teams that don't. For some, they're habits. For others, they're rituals. They're both right. If you don't believe anymore, no, it's not going to help you. If you do believe, you're also right. That's how you get results. Isn't that what we want? Results? What can you do? I say, make up your own ritual. If the daily stand-up doesn't work, meet every other day. If you want to end by singing a song, sing the song. We have that in Thanksgiving dinner in the United States. Some people eat turkey, some people don't, but it's still Thanksgiving. It still means something, whether you're eating turkey or ham or chicken. That's how we get better. By looking at the science, taking advantage of the evidence. And now I hope you can go out and pay attention to the numbers on your teams and in your organizations and maybe create some interesting rituals. We know these are things that we have been doing for tens of thousands of years. Now we have science to back it up. I hope we have a little bit of time for questions. I wish I could be there with you. I miss you all. Thanks so much for being here.